like to call the meeting to order. Folks could find a seat. That'd be great. Good evening. My name is Angela O'Connor, and I am the chairman of the Department of Public Utilities, and I am the acting chair of the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel, or NDCAP. This is the second meeting of NDCAP, and I'm glad to be with you here tonight in this beautiful library. First, I'd like to recognize any elected officials that are here, and I want to recognize my colleague, Commissioner Robert Hayden, who is from the Cape area, so he's come here tonight. Are there any other elected officials here? Okay. I'd like to start with introductions of the panel members, starting on my left and moving to the right. I'd like to ask each member to give their name and the authority that appointed them to NDCAP. So why don't we
Dan Wolf, appointed by Senate President Stanton.
Mr. Chairman, appointed by President of the UWU Whale 269 at time. Mr. Chairman, Representative of the Philly Wood Union of America, appointed by President at the time.
I'm going to name Kurt Schwartz, I'm the Director of the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency legislation appointed to this position. Jack Priest, I'm the Director of the Radiation Control Program at the Department of Public Health. I'm the Secretary of Service.
Kevin Riley, Executive Director of the Plymouth Area Commerce, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
John Warrenberger, Director of Nuclear Decommissioning at Pilgrim Station.
Dave Noisman, Director of Recovery at Pilgrim Station, standing in for Mike. This meeting.
Sean Mullen, resident of Manamet and appointed by the Senate Minority Leader.
Heather Leitner, President of Consumer.
Joe Coughlin, Nuclear Matters Committee, Plymouth, appointed by the Board of Selectmen of Plymouth.
Pat Sherman, Executive Director of the Old Colony Planning Council, appointed by the Old Colony Planning Council.
Good evening, I'm John Chapman. I'm the Undersecretary of the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulations, and I'm the designee Secretary Jay Ash, who's the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda tonight is the nomination and election of co-chairs. But before we move to that, I'd like to clear up any confusion from our last meeting. At our first meeting, I tabled the vote on the chair in order to allow some time, at least one meeting anyway, for the members to get to know one another and to provide some of the members an opportunity to learn more about the plant and the status of the decommissioning. If that wasn't in strict compliance with Robert's Rules of Order, I apologize for that. It's been a long time since I was a selectman in the town of Rockport, so my familiarity with the parliamentary rules may be a tad rusty. Nevertheless, we will rectify that this evening. Before we move to the nominations, I want to remind the panel that by statute, we can act only by a vote of the majority of the entire membership. Therefore, in order to elect a chair or co-chairs, it must be by 11 votes. So, when we get to the vote of the chair or co-chairs, I will be doing that by a roll call vote. We have a very large panel, and to ensure that all votes are recorded accurately, I think a roll call vote would be the best approach. Nominations are now in order for the position of chair or co-chairs. I would like to open up the nominations by nominating Sean Mullen and Kurt Schwartz from MEMA as co-chairs. Since this is a citizens advisory panel and one of the core functions is to serve as a conduit for public information, I think it's really important for one of the chairs to be a citizen member. I also think it is important for the state to have a seat at the table, to collaborate with the citizen members on setting direction and to bring state's expertise and resources to bear on the management of the panel. I also think co-chairs frankly make sense, particularly in the first year, because of the amount of work that needs to get done. I'd like to look for the motion to be seconded.
Madam Chair, point of information or question or inquiry or whatever the parliamentary phrase is, are designees permitted to vote as voting members? What?
Designees from the panels.
I think they have.
Subject to check. We seem to think so.
Because they're ex officio members as a result of that.
We'll get an answer to you on that for sure.
You're about to take a vote, right?
Madam Chair, let's go to order.
Yeah, I mean, when we took a look at it, Senator, the ex officios provided that they informed the committee, the panel, that they were going to designate the meeting.
Just to be clear, I don't have an opinion on whether they should or shouldn't. I just don't want us to take a vote and then have a question that we have stand-ins here for members of the committee who shouldn't have been voting and then questioning the vote. So I think we should be clear before we take a vote about whether people who are substituting for others have the authority to vote. And I'm not a Robert's Rules expert either, but clearly that's something we couldn't do in the Senate, I can tell you that.
Chair?
I mean, the statute, on that Campbell DPU, the statute does provide that members can send designees to the meeting. There's nothing in the statute that precludes designees from voting.
Yeah, Senator, first line of the legislation, there shall be created a nuclear decommissioning citizens advisory panel which shall consist of the following members or their designees.
Can you say that again? We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, we're doing the best we can.
There,
He doesn't have as big a mouth as I do.
Section 14A of the legislation says there shall be created a nuclear decommissioning citizens advisory panel which shall consist of the following members or their designees. That's what the first sentence says.
I'd like to second the motion.
So we have a second. Are there any further nominations?
Madam Chair?
Point of order requested.
And the chair is aware of this because of some papers that I submitted. The question is really quite simple. And the question is, there are two energy representatives who are members under the legislation of this committee. I spent some time over the last few days with the Massachusetts Conflict of Interest Law. It seems clear that by being members of this committee, people are state employees, and this committee is a state agency, has the conflict of interest under the law that defines things. That brings their right to participate in discussions and votes down to an understanding of what is frankly a very unclear regulatory authority exception. I suggested in the papers that I submitted that this issue should be taken to the Commission on Ethics for an opinion as to frankly whether or not it applies to these energy representatives in this situation, and that they should recuse themselves and not vote until the issue has been determined. If it's determined, they're fine, they're fine. If not, I think saying with designees, you wouldn't want to vote questionably.
Thank you. That's in the statute, I believe, that she serves on the panel, so I think we can certainly take that under advisement. If there are no other nominations, I want to take a roll call vote for each nominee after the roll, and I will. Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert Jones.
I vote yes.
David Johnston.
I vote yes.
Thank you. I vote yes. John Chapman.
I vote yes.
Mr. Schwartz. You can vote. Joseph Coughlin.
Yes.
Jack Priest.
Yes.
Pat Ciaramella.
Yes.
John Mahoney.
Not here.
Heather Leitner.
Yes.
John Flores is not here. David Nichols.
Yes.
Kevin O'Reilly.
Yes.
Pine Dubois.
Yes.
Richard Girassi.
Yes.
Senator Dan Wolf.
Yes.
Jessica Casey.
Not here.
Sean Mullen.
Yes.
David Noyes.
Yes.
John Orenberger.
Yes.
Richard Sherman.
Yes.
I believe we have our co-chairs. With that, I turn the meeting over to our co-chairs.
Thank you.
Thank you. To start off the meeting, I'd just like to tell you a couple of brief things. Kurt Schwartz and I have chatted about how we're going to handle this, and the only one point I want to make first, before Mr. Schwartz has a chance to talk, is that we've decided that what we'll do is we'll alternate meetings. So one meeting I'll chair, at the next meeting Mr. Schwartz will chair. So with that, I'd like to give Kurt an opportunity to make a few remarks, and then we'll get on with the meeting.
Well, thank you, and I'll be brief. I appreciate the support. I look forward to working with my co-chair, with Sean. He and I met earlier today by email and then by phone. I look forward to working with him, but more important, I look forward to working with the panel. My objectives going forward are fairly simple. I am looking to help facilitate an open, fair, and respectful discussion on any and all matters that a majority of this panel wishes us to talk about, so long as they relate to the decommissioning process or planning, which is what the statute requires. I think that's very broad, so that I see as the one important sort of box that we live in, that is that we're here to focus on decommissioning, planning, process, progress, however you want to define it. So as we move forward with this, I think the committee, informed by comments and input from the public, will be able to set agenda items and figure out what makes sense for us to talk about, how often we should meet, and I look for you all by majority vote to provide that guidance and the structure going forward. And I look forward to having input from the public, structured in a way that is positive and supportive of the work we're doing. And from there, I will take your committee's direction and work closely with Sean going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Would someone like to make a motion regarding the governance, which is the next topic, and specifically regarding how we will govern ourselves in meetings? In this case, Robert's Rules of Order.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion that, in light of former Chair O'Connor's remarks about Robert's Rules of Order as well, that we adopt as a panel Robert's Rules of Order. I think that will set up structure for speaking time, for motions, and just make the governance of the panel run a lot smoother. So I so moved.
Second. Call the vote. Any conversation, any debate? All in favor by a voice and hand vote? Aye. Aye. Appears to be unanimous by the chair. Robert's Rules of Order is now the process and method that we will use to govern. As I'd like to mention from the outset, these rules, and I think we're all familiar with them to a certain degree, are designed to make sure we run an orderly, productive meeting. I'm going to make a couple of comments about our perspective on that, and first saying thank you to all of you who from the public have attended, because this is in fact a citizens panel. We want productive meetings. It's got to be done in an atmosphere of civility and respect for everyone's opinion. So in addition to the fact that we want civility and respect for everyone's opinions, we also want to make sure that the conversation is both timely and germane, so that this is a working panel. This is not a traditional public hearing. It's not a public hearing. It's a working group that has quite a task ahead of us over the next year to try to produce some good advice with the public's input and with all of the thousands of hours many of the people on this panel have put into this issue. So with that, I just wanted to lay down that groundwork. We are going to run on time. If I'm the chair, or I believe if Kurt's the chair, we're going to run on time. And if the commissioner had been the chair, we will do that. So the time that is allocated is what we're going to try to do. Now, of course, if the majority of the members want to extend the time, that can be taken up for a vote. But we're going to try to run to the schedule. Before I get into the specific details and look for additional motions, I just want to personally thank, I think on behalf of the entire panel, Commissioner O'Connor for her assistance over the last 8 weeks. I know it's been difficult. It's not been the easiest. And in particular, I'd like to point out the work that's been done by her Chief of Staff, Matt Campbell, and also by Stoley Singleton and Becky Ullman from the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. We wouldn't have gotten the group together as quickly and as cohesively as we have tonight without their efforts, so I want to thank you all for what you've done. Speaking of which, the next topic on the agenda would be to review and comment and vote on the accepting of the minutes. And before we do that, the last meeting might have been difficult at times to keep track of, but Matt Campbell, again, not to single you out, Matt.
Oh, I think you should.
Just outstanding work. The minutes of the meetings were prepared on time, and that was no small task. They were prepared very, very well. I thank you personally, and on behalf of the panel, I'm sure they do. Is there a motion to submit, or to accept rather, the minutes as submitted? Second? Second. All in favor? Aye by show of hands. Aye. Any dissenting opinion? Motion is adopted to accept the minutes as presented with no corrections. The next topics that we want to go over and get down to business on. First is an open meeting law reminder. We are subject to the open meeting law here in the Commonwealth, as we well should be, because we want to be as open and as transparent as possible. One of the things that's occurred very early on in this is that there's a lot of exchange of ideas and thoughts, particularly by email. One of the things I would caution all of us to be aware of is that if we send out a group email, and in that group email there's responses coming back and forth about substantive matters, we are in a deliberative process, and we may be running afoul of the open meeting law. So I would caution everyone, as I encourage the members of the public who we welcome you. We need you to share your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns with us. Hopefully, within a matter of months, we'll have a public portal and a website where there'll be a much easier method to do it rather than sending out the emails the way they've been done now, so that we can all see it at the same time. But I would absolutely remind and encourage you to be mindful of the open meeting law, so that as we proceed, we want to share ideas, we want to share opinions about things, we want to share details. We don't want to run afoul of the open meeting law. And with that, I'd like Matt just to provide one brief update, if you don't mind, Matt, on the conversations that you've had regarding if we should decide to create subcommittees, and I believe we probably will. But if we do that, the subcommittees may be also subject to the open meeting law. In anticipation of this, Matt's already taken some time to get a sense of this, and if you don't mind sharing with both the panel and with the citizens, would appreciate it.
Yeah, so we did a very preliminary analysis on whether or not subcommittees formed by this body would constitute public bodies in and of themselves. And preliminarily, I believe the answer to that question is yes. However, I do want to point out to the panel that the Attorney General is the one who's charged with enforcement of the open meeting law. And by statute and regulation, the Attorney General has the authority to issue advisory opinions when letters are addressed to the AG with questions about the open meeting law. So if you are going to proceed and adopt subcommittees for this panel, you may want to consider reaching out to the Attorney General for an advisory opinion as to whether or not the subcommittee would be subject to the open meeting law and therefore subject to posting requirements, keeping minutes, and all the other requirements that go along with the open meeting
Thank you, Matt. Is there any motion to seek an advisory opinion from the Attorney General on this at this time?
I absolutely request that we do this.
All right. Is there a second? Second. Any conversation, any debate, any ideas?
Discussion. I don't object to the notion of seeking an opinion. State, I think the answer is clear. I spent 8 years as chief of the Criminal Bureau in the Attorney General's office. I spent 8 years before that in Middlesex DA's office and headed their open meeting law working group. I think it is clear in this situation that subcommittees are subject to the open meeting law, and we will only better serve the public if we proceed along those lines. So I think we're just chewing up a lot of energy to go seek a formal opinion. I suggest we just adopt, we just move forward and comply with the open meeting law for subcommittees. The public will be better served anyway. So.
Any further discussion?
The reason why I'm interested in this is because I'm not necessarily convinced that there'll be a quorum on all the subcommittees, and as a way of facilitating the work of the subcommittees, I think every subcommittee is going to have to report back at an open meeting to the body, but that the nitty-gritty work of subcommittees is sometimes so tedious and without a quorum of members that it wouldn't necessarily trigger the rules, and that's why I'm interested in having, saddled with a lot of postings and the requirements of open meeting laws and such. I think that it may in fact interfere with the process rather than facilitate it. That's why I'm interested.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Well, I should on the we had subcommittees, and they had to be posted to the public. But
Can you speak a little louder?
Can hear you over here.
I sat on the FinCom committee for a while, and they had subcommittees. Now, the subcommittees had to be posted, and they were open to the public. But the subcommittees themselves didn't have a forum, took no action. They simply reported back to the committee as a whole. And the committee as a whole took action. There was the subcommittee itself had no power.
Right. And may,
Yeah, please.
And that's essentially the defining line that I'm interested in, because I don't, because we're not a policy-making or a regulatory authority, we're an advisory. I think there's room for us to get clarification, and honestly, I don't think it's going to chew up a lot of time to do that.
Hearing that, any other discussion? We have a motion pending and a second. Move to vote. All in favor of requesting an opinion in a reasonable period of time regarding whether the subcommittees will be subject to the Commonwealth's open meeting laws. All in favor, by show of hands, say aye. Aye. I think we're going to need a count. One. Could you raise your hands again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then all against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The motion doesn't pass because we need 11 members in order to pass the motion. We revisit it again. The next topic under the administrative stuff I'd like to handle is how often would the panel like to meet? I know there's been a lot of discussion. Would anybody like to offer an opinion or offer a motion? Yes, Heather?
I'd like to suggest that we meet the third Wednesday every month.
Third Wednesday of every month. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Second. Is there discussion on that motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm all for meeting every month. I think that sometimes, the realities of vacation travel in August, the reality of travel and family commitments around the holidays, that we might want to consider maybe skipping a couple months, skipping August and December, for example, in order to take into account for that.
Interject. The only problem I have with the third Wednesday is this is Plymouth's hometown. We can't do that in November. But other than that, I'm sorry to interrupt. There might be interest anyway.
So I would just give us some flexibility that I guess I would make an amendment to the motion that we not meet in August and December unless by call of the chair, but that we schedule a regular scheduled meeting process along the lines of what I mentioned.
Any additional? Yes, sir, Mr. Grassley.
I agree with the gentleman, Mr. Chair. I think that given the size of the panel, from where the panel has to come to, and the fact that by legislation we're only required to meet 4 times a year, I think it's a little excessive and a little demanding to ask that we meet every month. Not only that, I feel that since decommissioning doesn't start until 2019, I think it's July or June, we have a lot of time to handle some of the business that needs to be handled. So I think we have more than enough time. I don't think.
Thank you. Quiet, please.
I don't think there's a pressure for us to meet.
Ms. Leitner, Heather, would you like to either amend the motion or would you like to move the vote?
We can amend the motion to exclude August and December.
Okay, so the motion now has been amended so that there'll be 10 regularly scheduled meetings the third Wednesday of each month, excluding August and December. Any other discussion on that motion? Yes, sir, Mr. Powell.
Because the panel is new, and it'll take us a while to get some momentum going and so forth, I would also suggest that we look at, I don't have any problem with Heather's amended motion, but that we maintain some flexibility so that if as time goes on, it is determined we either need to have more meetings or fewer meetings, we leave that open for discussion based on the needs that will surface as we move forward.
I think that's a great point, and I think that without getting into a charter question, I think the legislation's pretty clear on that by a majority vote in the future, that could be amended. So, with that, any further discussion? Let's move the motion and a vote. By a show of hands, all in favor of the amended motion to meet 10 times a year with the exclusion every month of August and December on the third Wednesday of each month. All in favor, say aye by and show your hands. Aye. Aye. All against? Motion passes. One of the topics that I've heard a lot about is the length of time that the meeting should be and the start time. For many of our fellow panel members, it's quite a difficult task for them to get out of Boston and get down here at a reasonable hour and maybe try to get something to eat before they finish their workday. So I'm just opening this up for a brief conversation, about 5 minutes, because we are going to keep on the schedule. But is there any thought about what time the time start should be and also how long the meeting should be? I'm just opening it up to discussion. Yes, sir, Mr. Chabot.
I think time is good, 6 o'clock, and I think a few hours are adequate for the number of meetings that we're going to be having.
Can you speak up, please?
What was that?
I can repeat it. He said he thinks the time, if 6 o'clock is good and that 2 hours is adequate. Any further discussion on that topic? Yes, sir.
Wonder if people will be willing to entertain 6:30 to 8. For me to get here from Boston at 6 means I have to leave about 10 in the morning.
Is it train?
90 minutes, I just throw it out, 90 minutes productive, you start pushing 120 hours at the end of it, 120 minutes at the end of the day. Let's not forget that much of our work's going to likely will be done at the subcommittee level, so there's going to be a lot of activity. So just wonder if people would consider 6:30 to 8.
Any further discussion on it? Yes, sir, Mr. O'Reilly.
In deference to the folks who need to come down from Boston, I would agree with the 6:30 to 8 time frame. I think that's very reasonable. And give them time to get home.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll weigh in on this one too. You know, we probably want to leave some flexibility where maybe once a year, particularly as we get closer to writing some recommendations, that we want to have a longer meeting, and we might need to have a longer session that allows for more discussion, or if we're having people come in to provide expert witness. So I just wouldn't do a hard fast, 6:30 to 8, but maybe subject to the chair, but generally posting 6:30 to 8 makes sense to me.
Anybody want a further discussion?
I'd just like to have a flexible end time.
Okay.
No longer than 2 hours, but flexible.
All right. Do we feel like we need to make a motion on this, or do we want to do it on a case-by-case basis moving forward?
I'm not clear on what we would be voting on at this point.
That the time period, one of the things that I think would be helpful to a lot of folks, particularly those that have a full-time job at the Commonwealth during the day, is to know fixed date certain, time certain, at 6:30 or at 6 every third Wednesday. So the idea being, we can get clarity for that now and have flexibility down the line. Now, if the panel doesn't want to act on it, that's fine. But I thought, I've heard quite a bit of that. And the next topic I'll bring up is of the same nature.
Would you like a clear motion?
If that's what somebody wants to make.
Make a motion to vote for a monthly meeting, the third Wednesday of the month, except August and December, from 8:30 p.m.
6:30.
I'm sorry, 6:30 p.m. to 2000 hours, or 8 p.m., or at the discretion of the chairperson.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye by raising their hands. Aye. Aye. Against? Motion passes. It'll be 6:30 to 8 o'clock on the third Wednesday of each month, except August and December. We've got about 5 more minutes before we move on to our next topic, so I'd like to bring up one issue, again, for discussion, whether anybody wants to do anything with it. As many of you may know, Vermont encountered the same problem, and that's electronic presence and communications at the meeting, rather than simply having to be here for every meeting. Does anybody have an opinion about whether either through normal commercially available video teleconferencing or telephone teleconferencing that members could attend the meeting? And I just open that up for discussion. Yes, sir. Senator Wolf, I want to hear.
This is not a philosophical, this is purely practical.
Yeah.
I serve on a lot of boards, and that unless the technology is really good, it's more of an interference than it is. It's more of an interference than it is an asset. So if we do that, I think there needs to be a commitment to really have it be a good technology. You would need to have a pickup speaker every 3 or 4 positions.
Yeah.
I mean, it really takes work to do this well. So otherwise, it's really a cluster.
Any quick discussions on it, or we'll just table it for a future time? Mr. Pop?
I think that until we get some experience under our belts working with each other, it's probably better that we not go that route for a while. Once we settle down, get to know each other better and work with each other better, and can then make an assessment depending upon where we are and what the topics might be. It may lend itself at that time to electronic communication at some point in time, but I would not recommend that we head down that path at this point.
Thank you. Let's go on to topic item number 4 on the agenda, which is the discussion of the support services that are going to be required to support the panel's activities. As most of you, if not all of you, know, that the legislation actually specifies that the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs provides this support. That's what the legislation says. One of the challenges that we've already seen in the first month of operating is that it's not clear how we're going to get those support services or what they are. And for 5 minutes, I'd like a very brief discussion among the panel members of what do you think we need? I mean, some things are fairly obvious, but what types of things do you think we need? And what my thinking is, unless somebody has a much better idea, and that's probably likely, my thinking is let's get a few ideas on the table now and then circulate them between now and the next meeting so that we can put together what we believe is the resources that we will need and then figure out where we're going to get them from. Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned earlier, the first thing is the portal or the website.
Yep.
So that people can share the information. I think that should be
Critical.
one of the things.
Absolutely. Mr.
I
Grass.
think that potentially technical advice might be something that we would, not to denigrate in any way entities' input into the panel, but we may need some outside objective technical advice.
Yeah. Independent third party.
Independent third parties.
Any other topics? Any other suggestions?
or even the normal administrative things for meetings like this. You're taking and posting of minutes, you're posting of agendas for future meetings, what's going on with subcommittees if there are any, those kinds of things, so that the public is fully informed of what is going on. All that administrative stuff is essential to make sure that the process is working and the public is adequately informed of what we're doing.
So we have 3. And as I see Matt Campbell writing feverishly again, I want to thank him again, ask people to talk slower. This will have to be replaced. I know as much as you enjoy it.
That's true.
This will have to be replaced, this resource.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like him back.
Good company. Any other discussion points on it?
I guess that's a big question, is how do we replace?
One of the key ones.
And when would we have to replace?
Yeah.
So I understand from.
He's irreplaceable.
I appreciate that.
From my agency.
And how quickly would you need him back, I guess. So is there the ability in DEA to provide, that kind of help, administrative help to us? Even though we can speak to that, Dave?
I can bring that back. I can't answer it right now.
And I think, as Commissioner O'Connor said at the beginning, one of the ideal parts about the co-chair relationship we have here is for this year, at least for the moment, you got a resident and you've got a state person. It's the working together, because we'll definitely need resources from the state. The conduit for that has already been established. As I mentioned, both Stoley and Becky were invaluable during this last month, as well as Commissioner O'Connor and Matt. So I think what we'll do, Pine, is immediately start having those conversations, that somebody's going to have to do this for the next meeting. And although maybe we'll drag our feet. It's such a good job, I don't know. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm also cognizant of the fact that one of the things the committee's going to have to do is produce some sort of letter or opinion or recommendation to the governor at the end of the year or each year, theoretically. And that's not going to be any small task. I think having a resource that can help with the drafting of that document, that can help pool together the thoughts of the committee into some sort of coherent form that we're going to be able to work with is going to be really important. And so that might also be something that we want to consider.
Absolutely. Yes.
So can I suggest that with the committee's permission, this seems to be appropriate for co-chair, for Sean and I to follow up with EDA and report back and see if we can develop an administrative plan that meets the needs that are being identified, all of which makes sense to me. We report back. I think most of this will be able to work something out and report back on.
Yeah, I think Kurt's suggestion is excellent. Is that acceptable to the body unless there's some dissent? So over the next couple of weeks, we'll try to...
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
if I may, I think the administrative help is pretty straightforward. Less straightforward, though, was the independent third party. How we decide what that is and, how that gets contracted for. We may have some of that in-house, whether state employees are actually viewed as impartial, I don't know. But, I think we need to clarify that a little bit before we bring that back to the Secretary to gauge his take on it.
It's a very good point. Mr. Grassley?
Yeah, just thinking ahead, with Vermont Yankee going through North Star and their offer to buy the license from Entergy, I think at some point we're going to need some sort of due diligence. Not that this committee is not capable of that, perhaps, but I think, some type of professional due diligence, either on the economic side, on the numbers, or on the operational side. I'm not sure.
I think that's a good point. One of the elements that's in the legislation is, I think we all know, is that it's up to the panel to come up with what we believe the requirements are and present them. And I think, particularly even this evening, although time is limited, we're going to get a sense of the beginning of what kind of resources do we think. I think my own personal opinion is it'll take us a couple of shots at this to winnow it down. That's a very good point. Mr. Coughlin?
As time goes on, when we identify the kinds of topics that we believe we need some expert opinions on or background or what have you, I would suggest that one of the first things we may want to do is to ask our state colleagues if they have that kind of expertise in-house, because if they do, and we can get that kind of information on a topic, that we ought to use that's available to us. State agencies, just like federal agencies and so on, have lots of people, lots of experts, and to the extent we can use that to help the panel and save funds, et cetera, why not?
Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
To your point, we have universities and other resources I think that could help. I'm not sure if putting that burden on a state agency that would be able to maintain that third-party independence that we would be looking for if we're having an outside review. And I would also like to make a suggestion that we contact the chairman of the Vermont panel and ask them to come down and maybe do a presentation on some lessons learned or experience that they've had in Vermont. It could help us not reinvent the wheel.
It's an excellent point, and you'll get a chance to expand on it in a few minutes with the topics. Any other discussion before we move on to the next topic? Hearing none, the next portion of the discussion for about 15 minutes will be on the possible subcommittees. This evening, this is a challenging, and I'm going to pass out here three, if you don't mind. What you're getting is a copy of the drafts that you saw via email if you had an opportunity to see them, that Ms. Campbell was kind enough to send out to all of us. This is by no means a complete or a final list. This is, as it says, a draft list for discussion in possible subcommittees. My suggestion this evening, and this is open to the panel's discussion, is that as you look at it, if you think you've got the right idea on this draft, please make a note on it. I think it's important that we have we've allocated 15 minutes for the discussion of it, and I think that'll be somewhat spirited. But I would ask if there's a particular subcommittee that you think is properly framed in terms of title at least, if not in terms of scope of work and charter, because I think that'll need to be fleshed out. But if you would like to be involved in one, I know, for example, several of the members have really great backgrounds in safety. I hope they decide to serve in that subcommittee. I know some have great backgrounds in government relations, and I hope they do the same. So what my hope is that as we discuss this now, if you want to just throw your name on it and hand it either back in to me or to Kurt, we'll try to compile that while we're doing the other stuff for the next week to get a sense, not cut in stone, but a sense of what the group's thoughts are on these subcommittees. So with that, I would like to open it up for a discussion on the drafts.
Chairman, I just would like to see the spent fuel and storage included as a subcommittee.
Yep.
I think it's going to take a lot of work, Oh, that is a first. I am asking through the chair that we add another subcommittee onto the list that we've been provided that would address the waste fuel storage and transfer and the environmental issues and that whole sort of ball of wax. Redefine that a little bit.
Yep.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, we have that already covered in here.
In terms of how we try to craft it, we did.
Well, we're talking about decommissioning only.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about decommissioning, I mean, if we're using other plants as an example, Entergy is planning on taking the spent fuel pools rods out and putting them into dry cast. There's also waste management associated with the actual site itself, the mechanical systems, the water. I believe that under the proposed or revised draft list, we have site waste management there, which is encompassing, I think, of what Pine is talking about. If not, fine, but I think it does. I think it'd be redundant if we added something else.
Okay, that's all right. I didn't
Mr.
really.
Chairman, I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know the genesis of the evolution from the initial list to this list. I do know we were talking earlier though about focusing on decommissioning and not ongoing operations, and there seems to be some lack of clarity in that in the current list of subcommittees.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Maybe you guys could go to the mic.
There isn't a mic.
It's not working.
Maybe stand up.
We'll talk as loud as we can, and I hope, Mr. Johnson.
Are you recognizing me or the
Mr.
gentleman?
Johnson, for a moment. Come back.
Mr. Chairman, I was stating that I was not present at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't know the evolution of thinking from the initial list to the list we have selected or we're considering. However, harkening back to earlier conversation about the fact that this is supposed to, our intention is to focus on decommissioning, not ongoing operations. And I just find a little bit of lack of clarity in how these 7 subcommittees are written up, and so much as number 2 as operations. It's not clear to me whether that's ongoing or decommissioning. Likewise with some of the other ones, I'm not clear. Sometimes we say decommissioning oversight. P&NPP operations, we don't say decommissioning. So I think we need to establish with clarity what we mean.
Could everybody hear what Mr. Johnson's basic point is that we need to establish, meaning the panel, additional clarity about what some of these topics are and what they actually refer to. And I hope, as part of this discussion, and it will be an evolving discussion, I don't think we're going to solve it in one meeting, that we'll get to that. Mr. Grass?
The only comment I wanted to make, I'm totally sympathetic with the gentleman's comments. I think they're very valid. When coming up with these subcommittees, and when we mentioned the term site operations, we were talking about site operations associated with decommissioning, such as if there's any reduction in personnel that are actually assigned to the site. That's something that as part of decommissioning, we might want to take a look at. As far as the site is concerned, site operations, I mean, the reactor, we're not monitoring the site at all. We're just looking at decommissioning. That's my point.
Any other comments?
I would agree that the clarity should be there.
Yeah. And that's going to be a tough thing to wrestle through, to build consensus on what those
Meaning
are.
decommissioning versus day-to-day operation.
Yes. Right. Mr. Kaufman.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest we may want to consider 2 other topics, if you will. One is environmental concerns. I'm certainly not the one to take that on, but I think there's been a lot of discussion in the past about the air, our harbor, and our land, and so forth, and the environmental aspects of that. I think they're very important. I think we get a lot of input to it. And the other one is communication. Communication is mentioned in the statute, and one might say that communication might be part of community involvement, but not necessarily. It would depend on how it's sort of defined. If we want to define as a point of clarity, let's say what we mean by community involvement to encompass broad communication ability to keep the public informed, fine. But clearly the points that we need to clarify what some of these terms may mean for the panel as time goes on. I think that'll be very helpful, not only to the panel and the eventual subcommittees, but to the public.
I think those points are well taken, because it really becomes part of what I would suggest is at least a 2-step process. One is sort of categorizing it, and the second is describing what is the focus and the scope of work. You got to do that, and that's tough to do. Mr. O'Reilly.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I think it would be good if we went through, as Mr. Kaufman suggested. I see communications fitting right under community involvement. I think it's encompassing. And I think it would be important maybe if we went through what's going to fit into that box and decide we want that box, and those things that we're putting in the box appropriate for that particular box, I think would be worth the discussion.
Would we like to have that discussion now, or would we like to put it off? We've still got, according to our agenda, we've still got about 8 minutes to talk about it. It's not a lot, but we could take a couple. Mr. Swartz?
I agree we need to get there, but that will be a very long discussion.
I think so, too.
It will go for a number, so there's another way we might look at it. I personally think that we ought to be focused on the revised list on the bottom, because I think it makes more sense to me than, so as I look at the revised list, and yes, we don't have great clarity, but let's assume that we are going to mandate and stick to the commitment to focus on decommissioning. So let's assume that we're adding that into each of these. If we can agree on sort of, if these are the right 7, or if there's something else, then perhaps we can initially bring together people for subcommittee meetings, with the first task being that subcommittee needs to clearly define and bring back and report out before they do any work what is the definition. So I would just suggest to you, when I look at this, numbers 1 through 6, I can make some sense of, and my only question is on number 7, because I actually think number 7, the administration and how we as a panel engage with the public and get input from the public is really something that the whole panel ought to be focused on. I don't think we need a subcommittee to focus on the administrative end. I personally would suggest we look at 1 through 6. I'm actually working off what you folks submitted. It's your revised list, I believe. I'm complimenting you on. So there's one way perhaps of going forward, is forming groups, let them define, come back.
Senator Wolf, did I see you want to say something?
No, I absolutely support that. And just to throw something else out, I don't know that we have to actually empower all 7 of these committees. I think the way to phase in would be to get a couple of these committees going. I also think that I think we ought to have a couple of weeks to look at this and get to the chairs about which committees. And then I think the work at the first meeting of the committee should be to come up with a mission, or almost like a bylaw for that committee. And then have that committee report to the full group here, so that there is room for discussion. But I think the way to structure it would be for us to have a meeting, formulate that, come to consensus as a committee, subcommittee, and then work with the group.
So let me make sure, I think I'm understanding whatever you're saying. The idea here is then to create a subcommittee initially of anybody that wants to participate, to really narrow this focus down and clarify what we think the initial and then subsequent committee should be. Is that?
Can I?
I actually think that's not really, what I was suggesting is that we actually get back to the chairs with which committee we want to be on.
Okay.
Decide tonight to move forward on maybe 3.
Okay.
And then have those committees get to you, for you to have them start to meet. I just think to start with 7 of these, and then you come to a meeting next month and have a report out from 7 subcommittees is going to be the challenge.
I agree. Mr. Grassi?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'll throw this out. I look at the list of committees as a work breakdown structure for the decommissioning panel. And if a subject comes up to either one of the co-chairs, that is a way in which to then view it and then get volunteers, let's say if we need additional work. If we need additional work. If we don't need additional work, I think it still resides as a work breakdown structure, and to guide our discussions, any kind of work that comes up, where it falls in, where it doesn't fall in, things like that.
In the sake of transparency, I got to tell you that I've abused Mr. Grassi over the last several weeks trying to help pull together all the suggestions everybody got. And this is the distillation of that in many respects. So thanks for the help on that. I come down on the side of Mr. Swartz and Senator Wolf then. Let's do what we thought we might do in the beginning. Take the list, get back to us in a couple of weeks. Let's try to winnow it down as a group. And then at the next meeting, that'll be on the agenda. Yes?
Just, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure that we're using the limited resources of the committee to the best use possible. There are several of these areas where there is a very clearly defined regulatory footprint that already exists. We're not plowing new ground as a plant decommissioning. So in a number of cases, there's the opportunity to be able to provide a positive influence. In other places, there are very clear existing regulations that are already there.
I'm only going to speak for myself on this one. I know that there's divergent opinions. I think Mr. Toomey in his letter articulated the opinion of Energy in terms of that demarcation, that delineation. I think other members of the panel may not look at it that way. And what my goal is in this chair is to make sure everybody gets their 2 cents put in, and we have a vote on it as a chair, as a panel when it comes up. So while I understand and respect the position, the fact that we may, as a panel down the line, suggest to the folks that the law requires us to report to, we can provide advice that we think the regulations need to be changed. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that may be the voice of the panel down the line. And that would be my own point.
Yeah, my only advice is to make sure that we're doing so with consideration of the efficiencies of things that we can implement.
Absolutely. So before we move on, any other quick comment on this? Because we have allocated on this topic 10 minutes for some public input on what you just heard. We're thinking about doing. Yes, Mr.
Chair, just on Dave's comment, I think it would be very helpful to us as we proceed. As we are working on the various topics and so forth, to the extent that there is knowledge of, whether it's Dave or somebody else points out, of specific federal regulations that govern that particular area, and they could point those out. If we want to go beyond those, that's our call.
Yeah.
We can make any recommendations we want to the government. And then if they involve the NRC or DOE or what have you, and that might involve the suggestion of modifying regulation, separate issue, that's within our call to do. But to be made aware of what regulations may exist in a particular area, so we get that sense, so we know that, okay, we understand this, but we want to go beyond that. I think that would be very helpful in the end into our annual report.
I got to say, Joe, that point is well taken, because one of the reasons personally, and I think the panel was so pleased that we have all three representatives from Energy here, is we need that. We need to hear where it is. And that's part of the data sets that we're going to have to get. So I agree entirely. With that, let's move on to the public comment on it. Let me tell you, it's going to be a little different than some of the past public comment periods you may have participated, particularly the NRC, etc. This is not an open forum. This is germane to this topic. We would love to hear your thoughts for the next 10 minutes or so on what you've just heard from us on the subcommittees. We'll take it, we'll consider it, but we want you to be germane. So just two requests. First, that you stay on the topic of the subcommittees, and that second, you're mindful that we've only got 10 minutes allocated to it, and we will hold that time. So by a show of hands, who would like to comment on the subcommittees? So let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That means to me, everybody gets 1 minute. Mary, since you were in front, you got here nice and early, you go first.
Yes, Mary Lambert. Subcommittees are exceedingly important because they're most efficient. And it's clear when the legislature created the panel, it understood that there was a lot of work that had to be done now before decommissioning begins, such as establishing a radiation cleanup standard, deciding on rubberization, whether the site is going to be for restricted or unrestricted use, etc. Some of this will require changes in current regulation. Some require action by the legislature. This all takes time. So in disagreement with you, Rich Crassi, you've got a lot of work to do and a lot of preparatory work now. Mr. Toomey wrote a letter in opposition to some of these committees against number 1 and number 5. Number 1.
I'm going to ask you, Mary, I think we've all received it. I know I received it and read it with great interest. I want to give everybody a chance.
Right, I was just going to say, number 5, objection to emergency planning.
Yep.
Wasn't on target. Entergy knows that emergency planning is something germane to decommissioning. They're providing money to the state of Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and the NRC.
In the interest, Mary, of your fellow folks, if you've heard something tonight that you want to comment, we'd love to hear from you.
Oh, okay.
Next, yes, Rich. No, Rich Kraft. Rich Rothstein first, and then you can go, Jim.
Good evening. I'm going to speak as a former chairman of the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee, as we've dealt with some of these issues administratively that I heard. When it came to open meeting law, we could call a meeting and have it posted if we were going to have a quorum of people available. So if you have 20 people on your committee, you can have at least half that number present there, you can call a meeting, and the people who are present are the voting members. You don't have to have 11 people voting if you have 11 for the total committee membership there. The other thing is, in terms of communications, you're certainly allowed to disseminate information to all committee members. You just can't deliberate and discuss it amongst yourselves unless it's less than a quorum-sized group of people that are disseminating that information you can talk about there. You can't start disseminating and then send it to a bunch of other people smaller than the quorum size, because then you get everybody there. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
In terms of the subcommittee possibilities, I definitely recommend you have a spokesperson for your committee there, dealing with not just the public, but the press, the media, everybody there. Have a Sean Spicer. You need somebody. I'm not saying that you need to have a spokesperson on the committee.
I don't know.
And I highly recommend that you have a regulatory legal review and evaluation subcommittee too, as far as...
Can you do me a favor?
Sure.
Because I know you've got a great deal of experience. Can you just shoot us a quick email so we can give as many people a chance to
I don't know how to do a quick email.
Well,
no, seriously.
Really, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, Monica took some information down.
And I'll hear it earlier. Thank you. Yes, sir, in the back. Jeff first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Berger. I think probably everybody can hear me. I'm former longtime chairman of the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee. 3 quick comments. Number 1, I want to congratulate the town of Plymouth and also everybody in the EPC, because what you have here is a high-quality group of people. There's a great deal of knowledge and a great deal of expertise here. Sean is doing a great job of leading it. And so I think people in this whole area should be very reassured about the quality of this committee. Second comment, if there's any way possible to do this, it was very difficult to hear back there, and I'm sure on PACTV it's also very difficult for people here. So if there's any way to get microphone coverage of this before the next meeting, that would be a great thing. Third and last comment, in the list of potential subcommittees, this may have been mentioned, but I didn't hear it. I think there should be a security subcommittee. I would refer to Rich Grassi to see what he thinks about that.
It's in there.
I just see safety, I didn't see security.
Safety and security.
That's on the second list.
Below the full list.
That wasn't subcommittee, that was just talking about subcommittee.
Yeah, the revised list.
Yeah.
You got it.
Thank you.
That's my only comment.
Thank you, Jeff. And we have the gentleman in the back, yeah?
Steve Ryan, I live in Plymouth. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I would like to echo what Mr. Berger said. We changed the venue because you guys have a lot of important stuff to say. It's hard to hear you back here. Maybe the high school again. Another venue. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, Diana Price, Plymouth resident. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of having outside experts if possible. And also, as a citizen, since we don't know any of you or what your backgrounds are, I'm really interested to find out who has a degree in physics, who has a degree in nuclear science. Is there anybody on the panel with that kind of background?
I'm going to actually ask you, can you confine the comments just to the subcommittee stuff?
Well, no, but I'm the subject of outside experts,
Yeah.
and the need for outside experts. And sorry, but you were discussing outside experts.
Yeah, but that was in the context of what resources the panel will need
But
coming down the
outside
line.
experts are resources.
But it's not something.
It's not the subcommittee. And I don't mean to be splitting hairs with you, but we've got so much to go through.
Okay,
But
you just have a quick,
I think there's a great idea you're formulating. If you don't mind putting it in an email, and Senator Wolf?
Just a quick question, and I'm not suggesting we do it, but for this potential discussion, there are committee structures where a subcommittee allows for outside people to serve on the subcommittee. And we did discuss that, we discussed the subcommittee. When you look at 7 committees and 20 people, we may want to open the door to allow to the
I
point.
mean, that's where I'm going.
And so, I don't know whether.
No, that's a great point. Just 2 parts to quickly stay on. The first is that there has been a number of individual discussions, because we can't deliberate, obviously, about the idea of bringing in folks that for years have served on the Nuclear Matters Committee. They've a store, house of knowledge, to bring in other folks from Entergy who know specific things, perhaps from Vermont, Yankee. So that I think is a great discussion for this. The second piece, though, if you don't mind just sending us an email with that, so we get it on record and we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
And we have time for one more.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just again stress that we're only dealing with decommissioning.
That's right.
I'm sorry to be a broken record about it, but, I mean, when you ask about a nuclear physicist, one would have a question, why would you need one for decommissioning?
One last one. Go ahead. You were already up first, so I'll give this up. Yes, ma'am.
Sheila Lynch, Benton and Duxbury. I have 2 comments on the subcommittees. One is that some of them overlap. Economic and government relations. We learned at the last meeting that it cost $1.3 billion to close Vermont Yankee, and there's $1 billion in the trust for Pilgrim, and there's a $300 million gap between the 2 stations in closure funds. And so economic and government, we are going to need more money to close Pilgrim. And economic and government relations subcommittees are going to overlap. The second point is emergency preparedness, safety, and et cetera, overlap on the Vermont Yankee site analysis. Vermont Yankee's on the Connecticut River, Pilgrim's on Cape Cod Bay. The issue of the Vermont Yankee comparison on the Connecticut River with climate change and Cape Cod Bay with sea level rise. I'm noticing that there's a lot of...
Let me just interrupt for a minute. Are you suggesting that...
The subcommittee, 2 important points on the subcommittees are, 1, there's overlap of where's the $300 million missing with different committees. The second is, it's both under the draft list of subcommittees. Right, which is the topics for future notice. Well, this is what I thought as I did that, so.
You'll get a second shot at the top.
Sorry. So the 2 points are that the lack of funding overlaps subcommittees, and the comparison to Vermont Yankee site analysis on the Connecticut River versus sea level rise on Cape Cod Bay is a very important topic.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is very similar. It's the discussion of the possible topics for the next year or 6 months or so. We just distributed a copy of that. Again, this is not even cut in sandstone. It's just ideas. Like to do the same kind of an exercise that we just did a few minutes ago with an open discussion about how people feel about certain topics versus others, whether they fall into the scope of what we should be doing or don't. I'd like to just open it up for conversation, and I think, if I can give credit to Mr. Schwartz and to Mr. Wolf, we should take the same approach with this one, that basically say, over the next couple of weeks, get us back your thoughts on it, and let's get it refined. So with that, open discussion on the top 26 to begin with. Any comments? Any discussion? Not yet?
Yeah. So I'll go first. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the one that I didn't see in here is a discussion about the financial aspect of this. I mean, we heard at the last meeting, Entergy talking about what's in the fund, and I understand that they're going through a process to identify what this might cost. But that money, what's happening to that money? Is there additional funds that are going to be allocated? Is it earning interest in a checking account? So I think some sort of financial report on the trajectory of the decommissioning funding would also be an important topic to learn more about.
To just comment on that, one of the things I hope we can do over the next couple of weeks on this, the legislation calls for periodic financial reports on the decommissioning trust fund. The granularity of that is a little tougher when you're still in the planning process to figure out how you're going to spend it and what you're going to suggest to us. But we do have, and I think from the NRC's phone call yesterday, we've got a pretty good little roadmap of what's occurring up in Vermont. So that, to your point, what I'm trying to get for the panel, I think, as a whole, and I know that Kurt and I will go through this, is to say, okay, maybe not next month, but maybe the month after that, with about 45 days notice to our friends at Entergy, let's get as detailed a decommissioning trust fund report. Is that something everybody would want? And that's what I'm trying to sort of get the discussion down to, narrow it down. Yes, Senator Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, and it's not going to feel like we accomplished a lot tonight, but we have already by having co-chairs and by discussing process. I really think early in this process, the most important thing is for us to get educated. And so I would really ask that the chairs talk about that after this meeting, look at this list, prioritize what you think, and with our input and with the public input, what is the top priority for us to get educated in as we start to split out into subcommittees? Because unless we have a basis of information and
so when we come into the next meeting, we have some idea. We may not have consensus from the board, but we'll have input from all the board.
Additional comment, Mr. Grassi.
Just very quickly, UMass about 2 years ago, I think, had a symposium where they brought in people from Vermont Yankee and other sources, and they had a day-long sessions on decommissioning, on dry cask storage, on economic impacts. The regional planning office gave a presentation. I think we should try to duplicate something like that. I think it'd be very, very beneficial for this panel.
Heather?
I think that the dry cask storage should be a top priority because it's likely that the waste will be here indefinitely. And I'd really like the community to be able to have, if possible, a voice in where that second storage pad is going to be located.
Mr. Coughlin?
Added to Senator's comments and Richard's comments about education, the Plymouth Energy Work Group has had occasional presentations by outsiders too, one of which was last fall with a state senator or state representative from Vermont that I attended as a member of the work group, and it was quite interesting because she gave us a lot of insight as to what happened, both good and bad, with regard to Vermont Yankee and the town of Vernon dealing with the state and dealing with Entergy and so forth and so on, and how all that was supposed to work, how it did work, how some parts of it did not work, and she made some very specific recommendations to us. And so that kind of background, along with what the senator said as part of an educational process, I suspect, I mean, we already have the contacts with in Vermont, and several of our members, Board of Selectmen members, have been up there meeting with their counterparts in the state. So pursuing that to get that kind of presentation and education and background for us here, I think would be not only beneficial, but I think it would be fairly straightforward and easy to do.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
I was going to say basically the same thing. There's a similar group that was set up in Vermont, and she was on that.
Can you speak up just a little? I know it's going to be...
I was going to say that, there's a similar group set up in Vermont, which we had a speaker come down. I think it was worthwhile for the school here to have set aside a half hour and have them back down here to kind of educate us on what some of the things they've been able to do and positive.
Any other comments? Senator Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also think that, as Heather said, there are a couple of issues that are actually fast-moving.
Yep.
One is it going to be safe store, or is it going to be decom?
Yep.
And the other is going to be, the storage as it goes into dry cask now is actually, even though it's part of the normal operating of the plant supposedly, it's also going to be very relevant to the long-term implications relative to decommissioning. So I would also ask that we come up with a couple of fast-moving topics that we're going to have to substantively discuss as we get educated. And I would submit that those are two. I don't know if there are any others. But I think that the storage and I think the type of decommissioning, which could be a decision that is made relatively soon, are things that we need to be on top of pretty quickly.
Any other comments?
Double that.
I would strongly support that. I think Dave can verify that the recent RFO and the RFO not the refueling will take when the close down takes place in 2019. The only reason you have dry cask right now is because you had to have room in the spent fuel pool for the rods that are coming out of the reactor. Is that correct?
That was one of the reasons, yes.
Right.
This is one of those areas where I think reasonable, open-minded people can listen and say, well, wait a minute, this crosses over. This is not as clear as maybe some would like it to be. Are there any other thoughts on this? Because one of the things that I think would be helpful for the panel, and as we try to narrow down these topics and prioritize them, and I think that's what we're trying to do. There are so many elements of this that, I'm thinking, for example, to bring down someone from Vermont, I'd want to allocate at least an hour, to really do it. But there's a lot of other topics that, as we tried to frame this for everybody just for a discussion, myself, for example, I'm very interested in Mr. Sherman's members. It's what's going to happen to the employees. And it's not here per se. If Jessica were here tonight and could have made it, didn't get pulled away, maybe we would talk more about economic things. But I really would encourage all of us over the next couple of weeks, not just as neighbors and friends, but to say, what are all the topics we want to look at now? We really want to reach out. And I think the kinds of things that were mentioned, I'm sure Energy will be glad to provide us with those kind of things. For those of you who saw or heard the presentation yesterday at the NRC, it's a great comparative power plant. You really see, side by side, what Entergy is doing in other locations and what may occur here in Plymouth. A presentation just on that, and I don't know, Pine, if you think that would be helpful, but I think that would be helpful.
I do think having Entergy talk to us about what their plans are would be really helpful, because they will provide us with their PSDAR before the plant even closes. That's a short time away from here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're on a time schedule for getting that done, and it would be great if they would talk with us and engage us in that process so that we can stay with them on that.
And I am sure that they will. Yes, Joe.
Don't minimize the issue of communication, however we decide to deal with it. Once we have the website available to us, I think all kinds of documentation are going to surface that we are going to want to work with the state in trying to shape that website to make it easier to use. The presentation by the state rep from Vermont, we have that in the town hall. The UMass study, phase 1 and 2, we have that. There's a lot of existing documentation that once we have that vehicle to load it onto, and so that the public can be aware of it and tap into, I think they're going to be quite interested in a lot of the information that already exists.
Yes, sir.
Chairperson Mullen, I think this is the list is a great starting point, and I agree with...
Can't hear you.
Sorry? I think this list is a good starting point for us. Most of us, I think, have just seen this for the first time this evening, so I think we need to bring that back, give us an opportunity to review that, as Senator Wolf said, to prioritize this and basically build a business plan on what we're going to look at over the next 5 or 10 years. I'd like to know if anyone has an objection. Dr. Bill Irwin is my counterpart. He's on the Vermont Public Panel. I'd like to forward this to him, this list.
Please do.
And see if there's anything that we have a gap, or what his recommendations might be in their experience on where did they find the priority, because we're looking at it, very quickly, trying to decide what the priorities may be. Some of these things may be when there's a long lead time on it. Some of the things might be as drive-through storage, cask siding might be. You're not going to have a lot of time to do that. This is where we had opportunities to provide comment as well. So if there's no objections from my fellow panel members, I could get that out pretty quick to Phil and get a quick turnaround time back to the panel members.
Hearing no objections, Godspeed. Any other comments? Yes, sir, Senator.
Sorry to be making so many comments, Mr. Chairman.
Let's be up to time.
As we talk about subcommittees, I mean, this is how it's an iterative process. It would seem to me that an education subcommittee, they could really sit down and come up with a real good study tool for us. Would be very, very useful at this point. I don't know whether anyone on the panel has the capacity to do that. I would trust the chairs to do it, but it's really going to be, if we all have the same body of information, and we're going to need to become subject matter experts. I mean, part of the commitment to do this was to do that. I would really ask that we think about maybe moving that forward quickly as a subcommittee.
The only thing I can say is I know how much Matt Campbell's enjoyed the opportunity, perhaps. No, I think that's a great idea, Senator, and if somebody...
I'm not so sure it's a great idea.
I personally do, but that's okay.
With all due respect, Senator, I think with the list that you have, I think that education falls underneath every single one of them, not just as a separate subcommittee. And I would submit that if we go off and identify the subcommittees and nail them, and then find those subcommittee topics for which we're very familiar or like to get involved, then I think the first step is education under each subcommittee.
Yeah, good point. Any other discussion on the topic?
I would just offer that we have a website under capecodbaywatch.org that has a lot of stuff on it. We'll continue to post on that as far as we're able. capecodbaywatch.org.
Any other comments on the topics? Hearing none, then we'll open it up for 15 minutes of public comment on the topics. Again, it would appear to me that we're going to finish a little early, which is never a bad thing if everybody's had their say. Be germane, be on point. We're talking about now potential topics for future meetings. That's the subject. So with a show of hands, let me see who would like to speak. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got 15 minutes, so you got 2 minutes each. And why don't we start in the back this time? We started up front last time. Jeff, please forward.
I'm going to take away less than 2 minutes. The main concern that I have is public health as it relates to decommissioning as a topic. And also, how safe is safe store from DP operation?
Okay. Yes, sir. If you could just say your name I know Matt's writing furiously.
Lee Cook,
Lee Cook.
and I'm from Kingston. And I just wanted to reiterate the point that the senator and I think this gentleman sitting top were pointing out. I think that this is a great opportunity, and it's very encouraging to see it develop. And I think that it is a unique and new thing that you're doing. And so I think there are other people who have engaged in something similar in the past. And so I think that, it would be prudent as well as wise to talk to some other communities to get some insight and overview in terms of what this experience is, so that we can do it here in a much more efficient way. So I would like to just, reiterate the point that I think we could all benefit from getting some experience from it.
Thank you, sir. Who's next in the back? Rich?
I think if the committee is interested in hiring technical, regulatory, legal, or other experts, and it's like bring them in if they want to talk on their own volition, giving their opinion or advice, that's one thing. But if you're going to start retaining people and paying them, this could be a very contentious issue, decommissioning Pilgrim there. I don't know if the committee has authority to indemnify people who are coming in. There could be lawsuits. You've got to have a process there so people, if they're going to be retained, can be retained without fear of retribution. Secondly, and I'm not asking this question to embarrass anybody, but how many on this panel are aware that I think about a month or 2 months ago, the NRC had a regulatory meeting to review the current decommissioning policies and regulations that are subject to change? Okay, very good. Why? I know Rich Grass is aware.
I think many of the panel members are aware, but that's part of this process.
But the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot of stuff happening there, and it's very important that you have a subcommittee on regulatory, legal review, and evaluation. Somebody's got to keep on top of all this stuff. May not be an expert on it, but someone's got to be on top of that.
Let me interrupt for a minute. Matt, did you get that point? Because it's back to the subcommittee thing, and I don't think we heard that one before.
Yes.
So you're suggesting that we consider a subcommittee on regulatory?
Well, I'm calling it regulatory, legal review, and evaluation. Someone's got to be monitoring and keeping up. I know Mary Lambert and I do this all the time, but we're not always there.
Yep.
And
that's
we
why
can certainly offer advice and opinions from our experience and know-how there. But in terms of the committee, the panel itself, there should be a point person in terms of that focusing.
Thank you, Rich. Who's next? Yes.
Hi, I'm Henrietta Cosentino. I just want to express my own opinion. Thank you very much for coming and having such an intelligent discussion. It sounds encouraging the way the committees have been set up. I have a question about how safety issues are different from the question of decom and safe store and from emergency preparedness. They're all part of safety. And I'm just going to put out my own thought. For me, and I think for many, many other people, safety issues are the absolute top of the list. And there are two imperatives in my mind. One is that safe store is a euphemism for the most unsafe storage you can imagine. Because 60 years of safe store puts us at extreme risk. Secondly, broadcast storage, while it is the best solution to be done as swiftly as possible, will be no good whatsoever and not safe in any way if the dry cast paths are allowed to remain 150 feet from the shore.
Let me just ask, is there something specific about a topic you'd like us to consider putting on our list?
Well, actually, I don't know how to frame the question. It's just that the question of safe store versus decom is absolutely germane to safety. So that's one thing.
Thank you.
Okay?
Anyone else? Yes, sir. In the back. And then we'll get to you next month.
Steve Lang again. I have a question. All you people have very important jobs. You put a lot of hours in during the day. You have no staff. How are you going to keep all this together and get it together? You have to have a staff. You have to get someone who's going to coordinate this and keep you all informed of what you're doing so you know what he's doing. And without a staff, I don't see how you're going to do this. And, there's only so many hours a day, and you guys need to, you need a staff to keep this coordinated. Thank you.
Yes, and then we'll get to you, Jim. Mary.
I'm going to stand over here so I can see all of you. Because one of my points for the next meeting or the subsequent meetings, thank you all again for coming, is that this is for the citizens. And this way of laying out these meetings really needs to be addressed. That we cannot hear the people speaking, and that when people stand there, we see their backs. So I would definitely recommend not only microphones, but a new arrangement of people coming to meet so that we can be a community and addressing this nuclear radiological situation that we are all so concerned about that we're here for. And if it's a citizens panel, then we need to include citizens, and that means we need to be included in the conversation. And this meeting didn't feel like we were easily included. So I just want to really emphasize that, and to detail that with the subcommittee's standpoint, which I really respectfully am on this meeting, is that communication, even if we're all going to die together, because that's been fuel for woes, all right, at least we will have the feeling that somebody really did do what they said they could do for us. And communication is one thing that we can put a website up tomorrow. We can have a website up in a day. We can have documents going on that website the day after tomorrow. In 1 week, we can have access to documents and videos and transcripts. We can be covering the whole decommissioning questions. In 1 week, we can have a functional website. So I would really like to make that an emphasis so that we can really have the citizens' involvement in the citizens' advisory council.
And I can tell you everybody appreciates that. Let me just answer a couple of those. First, the staff here did as great a job as they could getting the microphones working. For those of us who were here early, we heard them working very loud.
Yes, they were.
And they tried everything they could. We apologize. It's tougher on us too. So we apologize for the microphones. You may have noticed the format was changed tonight to a circular format so we could all see each other, which was very challenging at the high school. We'll continue to try to do better on that because we agree with you that citizens' input is critical to this process. And with that, I know Mary and Jim had final comments, and that'll bring us to the end of the comment period.
Jim Lampert, let me take my couple minutes first. First, I'm a little disadvantaged when it comes to talking about topics, as I was also with respect to subcommittees, because the audience doesn't know what topics are on the list you ask, what Paul. My initial question related to that is, when will those be publicly available?
You know, I would think within the next couple of days.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, these are certainly not secrets. They were distributed to the panel. And I think, Jim, what we've got here is the growing pains of just getting started.
But if there were extra copies to circulate out, that would be a great first step.
I know that to begin with, you're welcome now. To begin with, we went out and grabbed I personally did some extra Xeroxing tonight, people ask.
Yeah, because I don't know, for example, everyone on the panel,
Sean, I can put them up on ours tomorrow.
everyone on the panel knows that my wife and I prepared and circulated a detailed memorandum on sorting out, suggesting topics, purely on the subject of topics.
Yes, sir.
There are a number of topics that were suggested there, and if you read what that memorandum says about what the subcommittee groups might do, there also are a great many topics that are wrapped into that. Second, on the question of education, I think most of Plymouth, and probably all the adjacent towns would agree, that perhaps the most important question before this committee is waste. In all of the aspects, where it is, how long to be here, etc. I've made some initial inquiries, and I think there's a very good chance that we could obtain Ernie Monis, the former Secretary of Energy, whose thing is waste, to come down here and talk about it. Probably about as knowledgeable as anyone there is, without anybody putting their spin on it, as to what we're dealing with, what the rules are, what is likely to happen in the future, and frankly, what isn't. So I think clearly waste, and I will continue. I haven't changed through my feet. I think I can work on getting him here. And with your permission, I would like to do so. The commission committee is really interested in hearing something.
I think there's two parts to that, just to comment. First, Mary Pine made a great suggestion, which is that she's had copies, and Pine, if you don't mind putting it up on your website tomorrow. So in the interim, that'll be great. It'll be sourced and can do it. The second is that the panel is going to decide who we bring in. However, that being said, speaking, I believe, for the majority of the panel, we welcome any input about ideas of who the public or the panel thinks are great.
All I suggest is if you would like him, I could probably assist you in obtaining it.
Please let us know, and we'll...
Well, what do you want me to let you know? How much more do you want me to go?
No, just send everybody as you did with the other correspondence. Yes.
Sean, can I work with them on that?
Absolutely.
So waste to me is clearly the number one topic that has to be covered. It's covered separately in the memorandum that circulated a few days ago, and I hope everyone, when they can't sleep, has had time to read. The only other topic I would add is unfortunately one I didn't expect to come up, and that is the question, it's a clear topic, of what is a hard closing date for Pilgrim? When we were here 3 weeks ago, I thought I understood Mr. Toomey to say quite clearly that Pilgrim will close no later than May 31st, 2019. However, there was also the NRC decommissioning call that you talked about yesterday. And the representative, and of course I don't know who it was, Energy, was asked on that call the same specific question. Are you going to close then, or are you going to do something else if perhaps energy credits come to pass? The answer was, we'll hold our decision until that credit decision has been made. This panel, number one topic ought to be, what date is it working with? So that, I suggest, is a number one topic for the next week.
Thank you. Because I was going to say, I don't want to get in between you using Mary's time if Mary wants to.
She uses a great deal.
Mary, if you want to speak on the topic, we'll give you an extra couple of minutes because someone ran a little
Save
long.
marriage, thank you. For priorities on the topics, I would put nuclear waste. Divide it out into spent fuel storage. Dave Lockbaum, Community Concerned Scientist, would be a very good person. He wouldn't cost anything to come up from DC. Dr. Gordon Thompson would be another person on spent fuel storage, the expert that the Attorney General used during license renewal. Then I would consider bringing up Dr. Singe from Florida, Holtec, because we have Holtec gas. To have a discussion and question of him on how thick the gas are, development of cracks, how they can be fixed. Then, as my husband pointed out, very important to get Ernie Moniz down here, so we have a clear feeling of what's going to happen, how long we're thinking about this, position you might take on the interim storage, position, what the deal is on Yucca, etc. I know that Entergy and North Star have come up, NRC, with a date, is it 47, when the fuel is going to get out of there, but there's no basis for it. So let's hear from Ernie, and we have full understanding that the honors should come down. Then the other one that is very important is a cleanup standard that can be done by regulation, a change in regulation, but a discussion. What do you want? Let's get it done because it takes time for it to happen. And if, let's say, a North Star comes in or something, we want to have what we want in the state and have it firm. A feeling of what do we want for that site? Would the cleanup standard for a unrestricted site hold, whether it's restricted or not? And then the other would be emergency planning. And I think it's important for the state to take a position on it as other states have, because, look, you're losing potentially a huge amount of money.
Let me interrupt you there. Many of the topics you just spoke to are actually on the list which you now have.
Yeah,
So,
I know that.
yeah, okay,
But
so,
I'm saying for
thanks.
the speakers.
Yes, please.
It's very.
We welcome
important
and
to get
encourage the input, and Pine, I'm sure, will start to work. That concludes the portion for this evening of the public input. We have a few minutes, so what I'd like to just do now is ask the panel members, not in the broad category of any new business, but are any topics that any of you'd like to bring up that we don't think we covered, at least at a high level this evening?
I just want to say that in the topic of this waste storage and stuff like that the sea level rise issue is important, and I would like at some point, not necessarily tomorrow or at the next meeting, sometime in the future, that we would have a little forum on that so that everybody is on the same page.
Any other? Senator?
Yeah, and I think, Mary, it is at your point and a lot of the other points we're hearing. I think it is absolutely critical that we, as quickly as possible, have a point counterpoint on safe store versus decom. I think that because that could be decided relatively quickly, this panel needs to have an in-depth presentation on exactly what the merits, what the cost, benefit, merits, demerits of each of those are, which includes economic, but more importantly, includes safety and environmental issues.
Let me ask, does anybody feel that way of this idea on the sort of comparative education, because it really is education for us, on the location of the next path, because you guys are got to be figuring this out now. Any comments on that?
Well, I think the environmental issues are extremely germane to that, and that it would help inform what Entergy does next. And I think Entergy is probably in the process of planning that, so.
I assume that, we're ahead of the game. Okay, any other comments? Mr. Kaufman?
One of the things with regard to education and communication that we only lightly touched on, and I think we need to figure out a way to try and look into it, is sort of the, for lack of a better term, looking at the best practices of, be it the utility plant, public utility nuclear power plants, or the merchant plants like Pilgrim around the country. This isn't the first plant to close. A lot of these plants are getting old. A lot of decisions being made to close them down. Some have closed. Being able to look at the ones that have closed, what has worked, what has not worked, what has been, what the communities have decided is the most important kinds of things to look at and to pursue with the licensees and the regulators and so forth. To me, I think that's very, very important. How we go about that is an open question. UMass, that did the two-phase study for the town of Plymouth in the past, has a reasonable amount of experience in looking into that around the country. Whether we should look to them or have some discussions with them and see how we might explore those options to educate us better, so we're not reinventing the wheel with things that other communities have done and worked out and have worked out quite well to their benefit, to me seems to be something that we need to look at on our own.
Just on this, there is, NRC in fact does have a good website, and they have a backgrounder on decommissioning, and in that backgrounder, there's a list and the status and the shutdown stuff for all the plants that are close to the country. So I think it'd be worth everybody taking a look at that. So it's just the NRC backgrounder on decommissioning.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
One of the future actions that we had listed was a site tour, and I think that would be important in our education process for people that have not been out on the site, to see what does a cast look like, what does a pad look like. I think that would be very useful for the group as part of the education process.
And again,
I'd like to do that in the summer, not in the...
Again, the exercise, because we all have a homework assignment now, we have two of them, and you can blame Rich Grassi for it, is that we're going to take these documents and sort of prioritize them for ourselves. Each one of us get them back to Kurt and I, and we'll try to make sense of it and roll it up to the next discussion. And, you know, there's no hard, fast timeline. Just the reason, because I think that's a great idea. Any other topics for discussion?
Yes. Mr. Chair, I'm just saying, kind of moving forward, and I think you've done a great job in laying out information ahead of time for us to think about before the meetings, and I would hope that would continue, that we would get agendas, draft agendas in advance to be able to give input to the chairs about, what topics and how to frame some of those. I would also, hope that my friends at Energy, and I work at a big company, so I understand how these decisions are made, that there would be opportunity where Entergy would put questions forward to the panel as well regarding how some of the decisions are that you'd like to have public input on. Ultimately, you guys are charged with making the decision, subject to all the regulations and the oversight and everything that goes with that. But it might be nice to have topics that you're debating internally proposed to the panel as well, so that we could have the opportunity to have some input, at least in some of your decision making, and you could say that you collected some of that input in the process. I think that would, continue the corporate stewardship that you guys have already shown, and also be enlightening for the panel to know what you guys are thinking about, what are decisions that are undecided, where public input, might be useful in some of that decision making.
Excellent. I can tell you that, and Kurt and I haven't had a chance to talk about this, but it's the 14-day rule, to try to get out a couple of weeks in advance, so people have the time, because everybody's busy, so people have time to comment on it, correct my typos and English, set up a bit. Any other comments?
Question for the Commissioner and or Matt. Any general sense of when the website might be able to be available?
Not right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so either. I think
So
it's going to...
you'll work...
Oh, yeah, I think Kurt and I will start talking about this week, to try to figure out which resource, because what we're going to do is we're going to go begging and groveling to get, which will do it for us as quickly as possible. But as Pine pointed out, there's some other great resources out there already as we sort of spin ourselves up and get educated. I, for example, when first appointed, got on and asked at first for every single alert coming out of the NRC. I figured that one out fairly quickly because they'll tell you anything. We'll tell you nothing, but either way. But anyway, there's a lot of resources. Yes.
Just to underscore, if we get that website done as soon as possible, we publish an agenda.
Yep.
And then we have supporting documents that each member can read prior to the meeting associated with an agenda topic. That would be tremendous.
Excellent. And we'll try to get within 14 days. Any other discussion? Senator?
Relative to the Holy Grail of preemption, I think at some point early on in the process, we also should understand who actually has authority. This is an advisory committee, but we know, for example, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency has some authority relative to emergency procedures. We know that the EOEA has some responsibility and authority relative to some of the environmental parameters. I think it would be really important for us to understand where there are lines and where there are blurred lines. And for the citizens, there's impact too, because we're told preemption, we really have no say. Actually, it turns out there's a lot of say. It's just how you approach the issues. So I think it would be a great topic for a future meeting, and I think we should do that relatively early.
I think it's great. Any other points for this evening? Hearing none, I'd like, on behalf of Kurt, and he can say his own, and myself, to once again thank you, Commissioner O'Connor, and certainly the hand cramp man here, Matt Campbell, for a great job, and again, Stoley and Becky for helping us get this all pulled together, and for all of you. It's a big burden, and it's a lot of time, and it's just beginning, and I think the award tonight will go to Senator Wolf, who came back from Montana to attend the meeting. I don't think anybody else. And, for those of you who drive down through Boston, thank you again. So does the chair hear a motion to adjourn? So moved.
So I'd like to commend you on a job well done.
Thank you.
Second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.